So we're in week 7 of this series called Mindset, and we have one more week. We'll finish this up next Sunday. But what we're doing basically is walking through the book or the letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the Philippian church, or the church in the town called Philippi. That's what we're doing. That's what we've been doing. We'll finish it next week. Our life groups have been going through this as well. And hopefully you've been getting something out of this study and out of what we've been talking about here at the church. There were times in human history where when a mother and father had a child, they would name that child something that they hoped that child would become. You know what I mean? Like they would name that person, I don't know, loyal, and maybe think that this will be a loyal type of person, or there was some other name. There were family names that they would bring in, and just with the hopes that child would turn out in some sort of way that was closely related to that name. Now, Shannon and I, we chose our kids' names. Basically, we wanted names that not everybody had, and that were unique. And so I think we accomplished that with our kids' names. Sometimes people choose their children's names based off of trend. There's a lot of trends around, and if you've ever been in school and you've gone through school, and I don't want to say a name because I don't want to make fun of anybody, but there's a lot of Waynes in the world, and if you've gone through like places, there's Waynes. Wayne, right here. Wayne over there. Wayne up here. Anybody a middle name Wayne? Sometimes it's just a trendy thing that somebody names their kids for. And sometimes a name is descriptive about somebody, or sometimes it's just a sound that somebody makes when they want to get your attention. Now, our youngest daughter, Loyal, who's over here and super hoping that I don't point at her, she's Loyal Dare Wagner. We love that name. We thought that was a beautiful name. But if she was going to be born, if she was a boy when she was born, she was going to be Levi Danger. Levi Danger Wagner. Why? So that when somebody said, hey, you need to be careful, that's dangerous, he could go, Danger is my middle name. And that would have been amazing. It would have been awesome. Sometimes our names, they reflect who we are, what we do, but not always. My name means a couple different things. It means wagon maker, Wayne Wagon Maker. I don't know that I've made a wagon in my life. But it also means burden bearer. Burden bearer? Okay, I can get down with that. Sandy, do you know what your name means? Sandra. Your name means protector of humanity. All right, that's kind of true for Sandy. She's always looking out for people and checking. You should get a big shirt with a P on it. The letter P. And just, what does that mean? Protector of humanity. And I was trying to think of people who I knew would be here today, and thank God you're both here today. But Andrew, do you know what your name means? It is awesome. Your name means strong or manly. Yeah, that's Andrew right there. Does anybody else, do you know what your name means? Anybody have any idea? What's your name mean, Deb? Debbie means bee. As in a honeybee. Okay. Busy bee, yeah, all right. Anybody else know what's your name mean, AJ? Shining bright or brilliant. All right. Larissa? Your name is Greek, and it means cheerful. All right. Anybody else? Paku, what's your name mean? Elephant? Zao? Zao means elephant. You're strong like an elephant. All right, I like that. All right, anybody else? We'll do one more. Yeah, Megan. Megan means pearl, like the thing. Okay, nice. That's nice. Yeah, like I say, sometimes names actually mean something. Sometimes it's something that we want to reflect. And the reason that I'm bringing all of this up is because there's 3 names that we're going to look at in the message today, and they all have really unique definitions or really unique meanings for who they are. So we're going to start today in Philippians chapter 4, and don't forget that the Apostle Paul is very closely connected to this church in Philippi. He knows them, most of them by name, and he's writing this letter back to them from somewhere else. And now he has 2 specific people that he needs to say something to as we start this section. Those 2 people are 2 women named Euodia and Syntyche. All right, listen, if you could do better pronouncing them, fine. Those are not American names. But Euodia means prosperous journey, and Syntyche means fortunate. Those are two pretty cool name meanings that I think. So he starts in Philippians 4, verse 2, and he's going to talk to them, because he says, I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. All right. The reason that I think that he's doing this is because Euodia and Syntyche were obviously in some sort of disagreement, all right? They had some sort of problem that they could not figure out on their own, that they're dealing with in the church, but it's important that Paul addresses them because obviously they're crucial to the work that's going on in the church in Philippi, in the town of Philippi. Otherwise, if they weren't crucial, I don't think Paul would have personally addressed them in a letter that was meant for the entirety of the church. So it seems like whatever's going on between Euodia and Syntyche, it was bad enough that it was dividing the church and it was stopping the spread of the gospel. And I think Paul calls them out because it's so important, because disharmony in a church does not further the name of Jesus. It doesn't further the cause of Jesus. Disharmony, in fact, hinders everything about a church. And so Paul addresses them in this letter because he wants them to squash their beef that they got with each other. Now, we don't know much about Euodia and Syntyche except that they are essential and important to the work of the church. Now, when people in the church are at odds with one another, the gospel is what is hindered. The spread of the good news of Jesus is what is hindered, especially if those people have important roles in the church. And I think Paul sees Euodia and Syntyche as crucial to the church in Philippi. Now, something's going on. It's preventing the spread of Jesus in the town of Philippi. So Paul is going to call on another friend from the Philippian church. In verse 3, he says, yes, and I ask you, my true companion, help these women since they have contended at my side in the cause of the what? All right, so it all makes sense so far. They got their beef. It's stopping the spread of the gospel. But he calls on his true companion. Now, that takes some research to figure out who this person is. That word or that phrase is, I'm going to do my best, it's syzygus. Syzygus. That sounds about right, don't it? Given all my teachers in here, does that sound pretty close? I mean, I know you teach little kids, but that's pretty good, right? Syzygus means my true companion. So Paul is calling on his true companion, but he uses the word syzygus. Now, we don't know much about syzygus. We don't know if it is a name of somebody or if it's just a descriptive word about somebody. We just don't know who that is. But we can surmise that it is a person, that it is a man, because it is the Greek masculine of that word. All right, that's enough nerding out about syzygus. We don't know if he's a description or if he's a person or who he is or anything else about him. What we do know is what his name means. True companion, loyal yoke fellow. And here's what I'll say about syzygus. Everyone needs to be yoked to a syzygus. Every one of us, every follower of Jesus, every person in the world needs to be yoked to a syzygus. Now, a yoke is a harness that would generally go around two bulls or whatever kind of animal or horses that they would go and they would plow the field, because those two working together had exponentially more pulling power than one or the other of them by themselves. So Euodia and Syntyche had been yoked together. They were no longer yoked together. And so Paul calls on syzygus to put them back in the yoke and get back to spreading the good news about Jesus. Okay. I want you to put yourself in a scene for a minute, all right? Let me show you this picture. All right, in the very beginning of the series, I showed you a little video of Lydia's baptism spot. Now, here's what I imagine. Now, I recognize that in all likelihood, when this was written, that creek didn't look like that, okay? Somebody built all that stuff because it's an important spot in history. But just imagine, with your brain, for just a minute. Somebody coming into town, and they go, hey, we got a letter from Paul. Paul sent us a letter. Paul sent us a letter. And what was the Blues Clues thing that they used to do? We just got a letter. Yeah, so somebody's running around town. Let's meet down at the creek, and let's read the letter. So everybody from the Philippian church goes down to the creek, and they're all sitting around the creek, and somebody, whoever it is, gets up to read this letter. Now, this letter would have been delivered to them sealed. And so somebody would have opened it in front of everybody else and began to read the letter out loud. All right? You with me? You're sitting there. Everything's going on. This is starting to happen. Paul's reading, or somebody's reading this letter from Paul, and it's talking about how great God is and all this stuff's going on. And then all of a sudden, as you're sitting there listening to this letter being read to you and the entire church, you hear your name and the person that you were beefing with's name called out. Now, there's no chance they were sitting next to each other, right? Because they're beefing. So imagine you're sitting there and you're like, this is a very interesting letter, Paul. Thank you for this letter. Wait, was that my name? And then, wait, what was that? And then you kind of just like, is he talking to us? Like, just imagine, like, this is what happened in this letter. He calls them out publicly. Imagine if you got called out in front of the whole church. But I think Paul did this on purpose because their issue was public. It wasn't a private issue. It was something that was damaging the church. And so Paul had to call them out publicly. But how awkward would that be if you heard your name and then you looked across the crowd and you see the person that you're having a struggle with? So right after Paul says that, he says, Euodia and Syntyche, y'all got problems. I need Syzygus to come in there and help with this issue. We got to get this thing taken care of. And then the very next thing that Paul says comes in verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the what? Peace of God will transcend all understanding. Which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Now, if we were just reading through verses 4 through 8 there, we could, or 4 through 7, we could easily pluck those out, and they would be applicable in our everyday life all day long. We could deal with anxiety. We could work with anxiety. We could go through a lot of struggle with just those 4 verses there. But in the context of what's going on here, and the context is very important, whatever's going on between Euodia and Syntyche that Syzygus needs to mediate can be resolved by them doing these things. Rejoicing in the Lord, not complaining or whining or whatever about everything that's going on. Praying, presenting their requests to God. The result for Euodia and Syntyche and their anxiety and stress with each other is the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. So in the context of this passage, Paul is telling them, knock it off. You're not even close to the Lord right now. But here's how you get back to that. You rejoice in the Lord always. Talking to 2 people at odds, put aside your differences, put aside your beef, put aside your offenses, and let Syzygus come in there and mediate this problem with you guys. The spread of the gospel is of greater importance, and eternity is of greater importance than whatever they were going through. So, let's try and pull some stuff out of this. Rather than being at odds with someone or yourself, and I think this applies to a relationship with somebody and a relationship with ourselves, rather than being at odds with someone or yourself, firstly, rejoice in the Lord always. Rejoice in the Lord always. Now, I will admit that is not always easy to do, but rejoicing in the Lord is far better than complaining or choosing to be miserable. Oftentimes we do make a choice to be miserable simply by not making a choice to not be miserable. Rejoice in the Lord always. It's an action. It's something that we can do. We can celebrate that. I'm going to get into that here in just a minute. If you're at odds with someone or yourself, remember to be gentle with each other or yourself. Listen, you're going to have problems with other people. The right move is to be gentle. The right move is not to match violent energy with someone. You know, somebody comes in hollering at you, you flaring up and hollering back at them isn't going to be good. You're going to get down on yourself. You're going to wrestle with things. I want you to be gentle with yourself the same way that I want you to be gentle with someone else. Rather than being at odds with someone or yourself, I want to encourage you, rather than anxiety, to be thankful in prayer. Be thankful in prayer. It's been too many times to count that I have been particularly anxious about something in my life. I'm a human being. Anxiety and stress is generally my first response. I'm just being honest with you. My first response is not always, well, thanks, Jesus, for all this other stuff. You know, sometimes it's anxiety. But here's what I do when I realize where I'm at with anxiety and stress or problems. I literally drop down on the floor and I put my forehead on the carpet. And I pray and pray and pray until I got carpet forehead. You know, the lines there. Now, I'm not going to lie or pretend and say that when I do that everything magically goes away. It does not. But what happens when I do that, if I'm struggling, I've invited Jesus into my anxiety and into my struggle, and I know that he's with me. So when I know that he's in this with me, the desired result is there. The peace of God guards my heart and mind. It would be extremely easy to just say, don't be anxious, trust Jesus. And I think a lot of Christians have kind of abused that with people who are struggling with anxiety. Don't worry about it, just trust Jesus. Oh, okay. It would be very easy to say that. And it is a true statement, if I'm being honest. We should trust Jesus instead of resting in our anxiety. But it's also kind of an incomplete thing. To say to someone, don't be anxious, just trust Jesus, it feels incomplete. Why? There's no solution. There's no path forward. There's nothing that you can actually practically do with that advice. And so Paul is about to give us the hammer and nails part of that advice. And I love this. In verse 8, Paul stops talking to Euodia, Syntyche, and Syzygus, and he says to everyone, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, do what? Think about such things. Here's how I'll summarize it. Don't be anxious, trust Jesus, and focus on these things. Don't be anxious, trust Jesus, and focus on these things. He tells us what we can do or think about in order to trust Jesus more. He gives us the hammer and nails. Focus on what is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy. Think about those things. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but whenever I sit down to try and focus and think about something, my mind goes off in 38 different directions. Anybody else? Anybody else a really fun person to be around? Okay. This is what happens to me. And so what I have to do, and I have done this more times than I can remember, I will write down whatever is true, noble, praiseworthy. I'll write down all of these things. And throughout that day, I will think of something and I'll write it down. Because that's how my brain works. I can't just coagulate a thought all at once. It has to come like that. But if I write that down, it gives me the best chance to actually focus on those things. I want you to really hear me. I'm not telling you some untested theory. I'm telling you what I have literally had to do. I've had to write out these words and take a whole day writing stuff down, things that are true, pure, excellent. I have to do that. I have to pray. I have to call on my Syzygus. The more I think about what is true and excellent and pure, the less I think about and stress about the things that I have no control over anyway. Guys, did you hear that? I want to say it again. The more I think about what is true and excellent and pure, the less I think about the things that I have no control over anyway. The Bible and Paul's advice, it's not theoretical, it's literal, it's tested and proven, and I am a witness to the proof of that. So, let's recap the story really quick, all right? Do we need to do like a calisthenics stretch or anything right now? All right. Here we go. Let's recap. Euodia and Syntyche are beefing. Paul tells them, Syzygus, you need to go help them figure out, mediate that situation. Paul's wisdom is to rejoice, be gentle with each other, kill anxiety, pray, be thankful, focus on whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy. And then he finishes that section by saying, whatever you have learned from me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. In my opinion, it's a very important qualifier here to put it into practice, because if you don't put it into practice, you miss an opportunity for God's peace to guard your heart and mind. Not going to happen by just sitting there, okay? Now, I know that technologically we've come a long way in our society, but I don't think that we're at the point where I can just think, I can sit on the couch and think about changing the channel. Does that exist yet? Does anybody know if it does? Like, turn to ESPN. Like, not commercially. Okay, so some weird dude in the basement has that figured out. If I want to change the channel and I don't have the remote, I got to go over to where the remote is and get it so that I can change the channel, correct? Right? It's just not going to happen just by thinking about doing it. The same thing is true about all of these things. We have to actually put them into practice if we expect any result from them. We have to put these things into practice. And if we don't put them into practice, how could we possibly expect that there would be any peace as a result of it? Because he does say, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Kind of means if you don't put it into practice, he's not going to be with you. I might be stretching there. But we need to put it into practice. So whatever situation you're facing, or a struggle, or a tough decision, or whatever it may be, you pray, you call Syzygus, and you make your list. Because when you pray, you're inviting Jesus into whatever is going on. Good, bad, ugly, and everything else. And Jesus wants to be with you when you're struggling. But here's the thing. Jesus is a gentleman. He's not coming in unless he's invited. All right, and so we need to invite him into these things, and that's what we do when we pray. When you call your Syzygus, you're inviting another person in with you, someone who loves you, someone who will protect you, someone who will help guide you. Everybody needs a Syzygus in their life. Everybody needs a true companion, a loyal yoke fellow in their life that you can call when there's trouble or pain or happiness. This is one of the most beautiful things about the church. It's filled with potential syzygi. That's the plural of syzygus. It's not syzyguses. It's syzygi. It's filled with potential true companions. And when I call my Syzygus, his name is Scott Adams. He lives in McLean, Virginia. He's my best friend in the world. He knows everything about me. Nothing gets solved when I talk to him. But I do feel more peace when Syzygus comes in. When you make your list, here's what you're doing. You're focusing on things that are excellent and praiseworthy. The idea about making a list is wise even if things aren't going poorly. What if just one day everything was fine and you were like, you know what, I'm going to write down all the stuff that's pure, noble, excellent, praiseworthy that I can think of today. What if you did that when it was not crisis mode? Do you think that if you did that when it was not crisis mode, that crisis mode wouldn't be so crisisy? I do. Typically, we get desperate for God, and then we call out when we're at the end of our rope. But that's not right. Make your list of what is true, noble, praiseworthy, and then watch it grow. And then the result of all of that is just peace. It's peace. It's peace. peace. And peace, let me just say, is not the absence of a problem. It's comfort and stillness in Jesus through a problem. When you think about what is true and noble and right and pure and lovely and admirable and excellent and praiseworthy, do you know what you're doing? You are retraining your brain's algorithm. God gave us a mind that we can retrain into something. That's mind-boggling to me. My mind is telling me that it's mind-boggling. You, by doing these things that Paul is saying here, you can actually retrain your neural pathways to a healthy existence and a healthy way of thinking. You can retrain your brain so that it's not such a chore for you to do these things. That's insane to me. It's crazy to me that God gave us the ability to essentially hit the handle and flush out all of our life, of our brain, and refill it with the appropriate things that Paul is calling us to here. God has given us that ability. My encouragement is that you would do these 3 things today. No matter how your day is, how your week was, or what you're looking forward to next week, talk to Jesus, call your syzygus, call your true companion, and make a list of these things to help you focus on Jesus. And thinking about all that we've discussed and about mindsets, and I want to encourage us to adopt this mindset in particular. Whatever I'm going through, Jesus is there. Whatever I'm going through, Jesus is there. And I believe that knowing this and focusing on this truth and putting these things into practice will bring about the peace that Paul is promising through Jesus. But it has to be put into practice. And I want to encourage you, don't wait till I'll do that this week sometime. Do it today. In fact, do it right now as we celebrate communion. I mean, probably don't call somebody right now. But use this as a time to pray, to bring Jesus into your situation, to bring him into whatever's going on in your life. He did this thing on the cross for us, and we, every week here at Northampton, take a moment to celebrate it and to remember what Jesus has done, to commune with him, to come close to him, to be next to him. As you hold the cracker and as you drink the juice today, I want to encourage you to invite Jesus into your life, into your struggle, into the things that you're dealing with, into your day-to-day, not just into your Sundays, but into your day-to-day life. Ask him to help you focus on whatever is true and noble and praiseworthy today. And maybe thank him for what he's done for us. Whenever you're ready.